The 1914 building program would see funding approved for the construction of 4 battleships. 3 of these battleships would be of an improved Royal Sovereign type. The directives behind the design was that the Royal Navy still intended for the ships to operate at the standard fleet speed of 21 knots, which is why these vessels would not be based off the slightly faster Queen Elizabeths. However, after recent underwater experiments had been conducted on HMS Hood, it was decided that the underwater defensives of the Royal Sovereigns were inadequate, and so these would have to be improved, resulting in the new design for 1914. By the 13th of May 1914, the new design had been completed, and the first 2 ships, Renown and Repulse, would be ordered from Fairfield and Palmer's respectively. By the 26th of August 1914, assembly of the ships on the slipway had yet to begin, and the ships were cancelled at the outbreak of war, as it was decided the ships would not be completed in time for the war's end, which was anticipated to last roughly 6 months. John Fisher used the opportunity of Renown and Repulse's cancellation to suggest the construction of 3 new battle cruisers to replace the 3 battleships that had now been cancelled as a result of the war, and this pressure was applied to Winston Churchill, whom at the time was First Lord of the Admiralty. Just 2 days after Renown and Repulse had been cancelled, the Battle of Helgoland Bight occurred, which involved battle cruisers, and John Fisher would use this as evidence to support the construction of more battle cruisers, but for the moment, Churchill would resist. That resistance would remain until the 8th of December 1914, when the Battle of the Falklands occurred. During that battle, British battle cruisers hunted down and destroyed von Spee's force of armored cruisers and fleet cruisers, making a decisive victory for the Royal Navy, but in Fisher's eyes, a decisive victory for the battlecruiser concept in action. Churchill had to admit that the performance of the battlecruisers had exceeded what was initially anticipated. However, Churchill's initial caution with the battlecruiser might have been more justified than seemed during the excitement following the Battle of the Falklands, because while these battlecruisers managed to destroy a fleet of smaller, weaker ships, the concept of using the battlecruisers in the battle line had yet to be tested. On the 28th of December 1914, just 3 weeks after the Battle of the Falklands, Churchill gave Fisher approval for the construction of 2 battle cruisers, the conversion of Renown and Repulse. The third ship, which was preemptively named Resistance, would not see construction. However, Fisher had already begun work on the new battlecruiser design, as on the 18th of December 1914, he sent a message to the Director of Naval Construction, Dencourt, with the following specifications. On the 8th of May 1914, 8 15-inch guns had been ordered for the Renown, and so these 2 battlecruisers would split them, meaning the design would have 4 15-inch guns in 2 twin turrets. The secondary armament would be made up of 20 4-inch guns, and no other armament at this stage was anticipated. The ships were to have a top speed of 32 knots, and their boilers were to be fully fueled by oil. The armor was to be similar to that of the Invincible and Indefatigable classes, and the ship's bow shape was to be similar to that of the pre-dreadnought Renown for improved sea qualities. What many of you might notice is that the design requirements from the outset seem to regress from the preceding battlecruiser design, which was HMS Tiger. It had increased armor compared to Indefatigable, and it had a secondary armament of 6-inch guns, which were better suited for dealing with modern destroyers. The next day, on the 19th of December, the first design was presented to Fisher. However, he immediately discounted it because he had changed his mind regarding the armament. Instead of having 4 15-inch guns, he increased the number to 6 15-inch guns in 3 dual turrets. The new battlecruiser characteristics would be presented on the 21st of December, with the first preliminary sketches being presented on the 24th of December, and after Fisher made a request for a few minor modifications, the finalized design was presented on the 26th of December. Some noteworthy characteristics of the design are that it had a length between perpendiculars of 750 feet, it had a maximum beam of 90 feet, an average draft of 25.5 feet, and a displacement of 26,000 tons. The ships would have a maximum speed of 32 knots, produced from 4 steam turbines, creating 112,000 shaft horsepower. The armament would be made up of 6 15-inch guns, 25 4-inch guns, 4 3-pounder guns, 5 machine guns, and 2 21-inch torpedo tubes. The ship's armor plating would have a maximum thickness of 6 inches on the belt, 8 inches on the turret faces, 7 inches on the barbettes, and 10 inches on the conning tower. As for the decks, they would not receive armor plate, but instead protective plating, which reached a maximum thickness of 2 inches on the sloping sides. All of this design work had been completed by the time Churchill approved the battlecruiser project on the 28th of December, and the next day on the 29th of December, Fisher began talks with potential builders. Initially, Fairfield and Palmer was expected to construct Renown and Repulse as battlecruisers, but Palmer's did not have a slipway large enough to handle the new design. Fisher's eyes quickly transferred over to the John Brown shipyard, which did have the adequate facilities for constructing such a large ship, and so the contract was sent from Palmer's to John Brown, along with all materials that had been accumulated for the battleship that was intended to be built several months prior. It is worth noting that there was a new stipulation to the contracts. Fairfield and John Brown had to have Renown and Repulse completed in 15 months, and the contracts would begin the next day on the 30th of December. Naval construction would begin working on detailed designs for the ships. They would then transfer their plans to the shipyards, and those plans would be converted into working arrangements for ship construction, and this process would carry on throughout the majority of January, and by the 25th of January 1915, enough plans had been assembled to where work could begin, and the keels to both vessels would be laid down that day. Renown, which was being constructed at Fairfield, was launched on the 4th of March 1916 and completed on the 20th of September 1916. Repulse, which was being constructed at John Brown, was launched on the 8th of January 1916 and completed on the 18th of August 1916. Both ships were completed a little later than expected, taking 20 months for Repulse and 21 months for Renown, but given the scale of the ships, it was still a remarkable and unprecedented time frame. The reason the ships were delayed are twofold. There were some modifications to the design made during construction, and as their construction was nearing completion, Fisher and Winston Churchill both resigned from their positions within the Admiralty, and so pressure on speedy construction was lifted. Their characteristics as completed are as follows. They would have a standard displacement of 27,320 tons. They would have an overall length of 794 feet, an overall beam of 90 feet, and an average draft of 26 feet. They would have a maximum speed of 32.5 knots, operating at 126,300 shaft horsepower, produced by 4 Brown-Curtis impulse-type steam turbines, spinning 4 screws. They received their steam supply from 42 Babcock & Wilcox boilers operating at 275 psi. Their armament would be made up of 6 15-inch 42 caliber Mark I main battery guns, 17 4-inch 44 caliber Mark IX guns, 2 3-inch anti-aircraft guns, 1 12-pounder field gun, 4 3-pounder guns, 15 machine guns, and 10 21-inch torpedo tubes. Their armor characteristics for the most part remained unchanged, with one major exception, and that being the gun houses, with the turret faceplates now being increased to 9 inches, but the side plates and rear plate being decreased to 7 inches. These were most certainly amongst the most unusual vessels constructed during the First World War. Technologically, they were highly advanced and up-to-date, and the time taken to construct them was unmatched at the time. While there was a significant increase in the offensive capability regarding the primary armament, going back to the 4-inch gun rather than retaining 6-inch guns, and also thinning the armor back out to the days of the armored cruiser, were questionable decisions. Due to those drawbacks, especially following the Battle of Jutland, it was recognized that the defensive system of the Renown class was defective, and so armor values were increased during the First World War where they could be, but following the First World War, both ships had to go through major reconstructions in order to improve their defensive qualities. Even taking into account their deficiencies, these two vessels were extraordinary in most respects, and They were the only class of British battlecruisers that would serve the Royal Navy in both World Wars. With that having been said, I have nothing more I wish to add on to this topic for today. So, if you have learned something new in this video, why not leave a like and a comment down below, and have a wonderful day.